It does feel like there's a renewed sense of confidence in the marketplace from buyers.
Are you finding that you're having to recalibrate price expectations with sellers off the back of increased listings?
We are seeing lower sale prices in property that do need work or haven't been presented correctly to the market.
Is 2025 going to be the year of the buyer? And what does that actually mean from a seller's perspective? With the change in market conditions, how can sellers stand out from the pack? Joining me to share their insider tips and tricks so sellers can get the results they're after is Luke Beniziotis from Woodard's Real Estate and Paul Piacentine from Stone Real Estate. Thank you so much for joining me, guys. It's been a really welcome relief, I think, for all buyers who are coming into the market, considering that there's more choice out there than what we've probably seen in the last 4 years, according to our listings data. But for sellers, what this actually means is that because buyers do have more choice than in previous years and they have more control over what they're able to buy, they're more picky, I think, with their property purchases. Now, Paul, are you seeing this reflected in your market, more listings volumes and therefore more choice?
Yes, what's important when there's more listings, obviously there's more choice for buyers. But what we also had in the previous market where there was less listings, and a lot of that, like I was also dealing with a lot of downsizers that were looking to buy townhouses and villas. But because there wasn't much activity, they were scared by committing to a bridging loan or committing to a purchase with knowing that there was a buyer straight away. So they were reserved. Now, if that downsize is reserved, it means they're not putting their house in the market. So irrespective, obviously it's looking like a buyer's market at the moment. But if we don't have those buyers looking, you're also not going to have potential listings because the person, for example, is looking to downsize also wants to be able to understand if they're going to list their property, that they have a certain expectation on value and also timeline in the market.
Okay, so with these increased listings, how are your buyers responding to it? Because I do imagine it makes them more optimistic about their property search.
We are finding that um, um, they're a lot more cheekier in relation to how they position their offers. The caliber of offer that they make is a lot less than it used to be. So we're seeing that being a bit more challenging in relation to working the buyer to get more out of that for the vendor. But what's happening is because they are potentially doing that, there has been circumstances now that one or two other buyers, because there's been a delay in time, have actually joined and participated in the offers. So it's actually potentially allowed leverage on one or two buyers.
Luke, what about you? What about in your patch in Blackburn? You know, with an increase in listing volumes, are you seeing an increase in buyer activity?
For us, I'm not quite sure. Paul is obviously in a different state. Our market, it's a bit two speed still. We didn't feel the pinch that everyone was talking about really until the last quarter of 2024. And it almost feels like our market has started with a bit of energy this side of the new year. So the jury's still out. We need to see auction results because we're a heavily auction market. But yeah, very similar stories to what Paul was saying at the end of last year. The offers that were coming in were quite cheeky. We're generally going to auction if we were lucky with 1 to 2 people with the intent of bidding. We don't have registration in Victoria, so you can fly a little bit blind sometimes until the day to see what's really happening. But it does feel like there's a renewed sense of confidence in the marketplace from buyers, particularly with the news that came out about inflation and all those sorts of things. So definitely the end of 2024 had its challenges, but the start of 2025 has potentially got a question mark on, is the tide turning to become probably a balanced market for us?
I like what you both said there about some cheeky offers, because are you finding that you're having to recalibrate price expectations with sellers off the back of increased listings?
Yes and no. I think for us, we've got some really sought after school zones in the marketplace that we offer in, and they would be classed as A grade property. Anything that's in there that's move in ready, they're still probably selling at a level that we would have seen through the COVID pricing. Like that hasn't really shifted the A grade market. But for the Bs and Cs, we're trying to get it right before we go to market. So it's having really good conversations with owners at the start of the campaign, we can either set ourselves up for success from today, or we can look at it again in 7 to 10 days. But we all know that the best viewing is within the first week on realestate.com. You get your highest number of impressions and views. So why waste that? My philosophy always is start how we'd like to finish instead of chasing our tail at the end, because you never catch up. That's the way the market works. There's always fresh stock coming on, new listings, and the attention quickly jumps from one to the other.
Paul, is there any hard conversations that you're having about property values with some vendors?
100%. 2024 was our best transactional year, and December was a fantastic selling month for us. But even though we as an office were transacting quite strongly, but we did see a change in pricing, which meant the hard questions and the hard conversations. And we virtually were able to identify from a 2022 pricing to what offers came in for the same house in end of 2024. And we virtually almost calculated to about a 7 to 8% change decrease. So yes, we were transacting. Yes, we were hosting the process there, but in relation to a buyer, they were seeing a better result for purchasing of 7 to 8%, which we could almost calculate from 2024 down to from 2022. So yes, we were transacting, and there was movement in the market for us, and we have seen a spark in the market for January of 2025, although we have seen a variation of that sort of percentage band.
I had a conversation recently with an agent who said that her buyers are kind of being quite bullish on price, and that if they make an offer to a vendor and it's rejected, they're not entering into a negotiation phase anymore because they can actually just move on to the next property. Luke, are you seeing this as well? Buyers feeling like they have a little bit of power back in the market. So if their offer on a desired property is turned down, they're like, oh, thank you very much. Good luck. I'm going to move on.
Thankfully, the buyers I've been dealing with aren't that brutal. That sounds like a really hard market to work in. I think because we're in that middle ring of Melbourne, traditionally your family suburbs, there's always a reasonable buyer depth for us. Like the only time I feel like we've ever struggled was during the Banking Royal Commission back in 2018. That was hard. We'd see 2 or 3 buyers for a month. It was very hard. Whereas at the moment, we still get reasonable numbers. Um, they're open to negotiation, but I get their ability or their desire to stretch and meet is probably not as forthcoming as it once was, unless there's competition. If we've got a competitive process, all of that goes out the window, and it really comes down to who's got the most money. But a one-on-one negotiation, it does get a little bit like that. They get to a point and they go, well, our offer's there, but we're going to go look at X, Y, Z.
What do buyers seem at the moment to be unwilling to compromise on? Is there any elements in a home that buyers are like, no, that's it, it's not what I want, or, yes, that is what I want, so I'm going to really go for it?
It's really coming down to, and it's still a flow on from the materials cost rises that we saw and the labour shortages. They've left the buyer market going, well, if we can buy turnkey, that's really our preference, and they'll fight really hard for it. And anything that is viewed as either something that's more than likely going to be demolished, development site, those sorts of things, they are really steering clear of, unless they're priced to attract attention. I think that's always the key with what we do. It's if you're overshooting the mark, whether you're selling a house, a car, a television, anything like that, it'll sit there and it'll wait because they'll go and buy something else. But there is still that desire to buy turnkey, or doesn't have to be brand new renovations, but the ability to just move in day one, not have to do anything, and then over time we can add value. That's probably what people are really gravitating towards.
So do you think it's the unrenovated properties where sellers are maybe having to be more flexible on that price tag?
Definitely, but it's that meeting at the start of the campaign, really setting it up for success and having that honest conversation, at the point of listing as an agent. I think if you're a vendor out in the marketplace, you can do your research using realestate.com, prop track, all those sort of features that are out there to get an understanding of roughly what your house will be worth. So if you have an agent in the house that's telling you 30% more and everyone else is at a certain range, that's the oldest trick in the book from an agent. Throw out a high price and then spend the next 6 weeks bringing it down. But setting yourself up to sell it from the start will counter any of those issues from buyers, because you'll have interest from day one.
Paul, with the sellers that you're dealing with, who are the ones who are having to be a little bit more flexible on that price tag? Is it the people who are selling kind of the unrenovated homes, as opposed to the people who are selling those turnkey move in right now ready properties who are probably getting better prices? Who's having to kind of adjust their expectations?
The non-turnkey property. The non-turnkey property is um, um, always doing well, because where I see it is that you can go to a bank and the bank will say, "We're going to lend you $1 million." I'll just use $1 million as a hypothetical. We'll lend you $1 million, and then Mr. Buyer comes back and says, "Hey, look, thanks for the million. I've actually found the property, and that property is actually at 600,000. But I love the position, I love the home, but I want to renovate it." And then Mr. Bank says, "Well, no, hold on a second. We're happy to loan you $1 million, but we're not prepared to give you 600,000 with 400,000 unsecured for you to do the renovations." So when you have that turnkey, it is easier to have multiple buyers and a lot of interest. And property that does need work sometimes is a little bit more challenging, and also faces a little bit variation in relation to their sellability and price, because of what the expectation is of a buyer. Problem that we have sometimes with the non-renovated properties, or properties that have one or two issues, is I've said it plenty of times, and I've had plenty of examples that have actually been corrected, that where a buyer actually sees an item as a $5,000 variation. So if there's guttering and the gutter needs a little bit of repair and it's a $500 exercise, a buyer will see that as, let's just take $5,000 off. So we are seeing lower sale prices in property that do need work or haven't been presented correctly to the market.
Do you ever receive backlash from those sellers when it comes to price? Because, I mean, typically for the last couple of years, sellers have been in such a position of strength. So as the market fluctuates and, shifts and changes, do sellers go to you, hey, hang on, I'm not happy here with what I'm getting?
And that's why I'm in a job. We're there to facilitate the process. So unfortunately, if that wasn't the case, we wouldn't have a job. So 100% they always do, and they try to justify the situation. And sometimes this is where we then, as negotiators, will say, "Look, we'll get that item fixed at the vendor's cost." And so it all different processes for different situations for different reasons. Or it might be an estate matter; they don't want to do any work. There's multiple siblings. And they're happy to negotiate a fee to sell the property at not a discounted price, but at a price which is amicable or gives continuity to all the work that needs to be done to the home. So every situation can vary, and that's our job to negotiate, because effectively, what is the outcome of a buyer and a seller? They want to transact, and that's my job to make sure there's a transaction there for both.
Luke, what about you? Like, what advice are you giving to sellers at the moment who are coming into market? Because, as I just mentioned, like they were in a position of strength and now obviously tides are turning. So, how are you educating them?
It starts at the listing presentation, being really clear on how we get the best possible price in the market. And there's a bit of a formula to it. It in simple terms, it's more buyers, emotionally connected, under competition will give us the best price possible. So more buyers, that'll come through a great marketing campaign, a good database, and great buyer work. But the emotional connection can often come from preparing the home for sale. And it's not about spending $50,000 or $100,000 on new kitchens and bathrooms sometimes. Sometimes people have that capacity and they'll do it and reap the rewards, but there's also time and energy that you need to factor in if you're going to go down that path. But sometimes just something simple as a fresh coat of paint, carpets, fresh mulch in the garden, and a good, chop across all of the landscaping can be enough to take something that looked like it needed a lot of renovation, taking it to something that is in a position where, oh, well, we could move into this, enjoy it, and in 2-3 years' time, do the kitchen, do the bathroom. There's really smart ways people can be adding value for very little cost and effort to make sure that they get that engagement in the market.
I'm really glad you mentioned, renovations and kind of adding those little sprinklings of flavor. I guess the cost of that in today's economy can be, it's a drawback for people.
Mhm.
As you say, not everybody has that capacity. But in your experience, how much can a well presented property add to the price tag?
It's really hard to put a definite figure on it, but it's The increased level of competition, and you see it every weekend when you look at the results. You can have two really similar homes that go to auction in our market. One might sell for $1 million and it's been treated just as land, but you can look at the photos and someone of the other one has done paint, carpet, put some higher furniture in there. They might have spent $10,000, $15,000 to do everything. And then they sell for 1.15 because two other families saw that as an opportunity to live in and enjoy it versus that place that's had nothing done to it. It's been the same for 50 years. The difference can be 100,000, if not more.
Well, Paul, what about you? Like when it comes to presentation, what are your top three areas that sellers should focus on so that they actually really can grab the attention of buyers?
Painting, staging, landscaping are our key components. Obviously, the landscaping is that your street appeal. Paint is that it's fresh, and carpet that it's fresh, and staging also, because homes that sometimes aren't staged, some buyers just find it difficult where to position furniture, where would the lounge go, even though it's sometimes it is obvious, but some people can't piece colour and can't piece furniture together. It may not necessarily increase value. It can reduce days on market, but where the value may increase is that it creates competition. Competition is the driver of price. You might have one or two people say, "Well, we're interested in this as well, and we want to present our offer to the vendor." And then obviously in the state of New South Wales, all offers must be submitted in writing to the vendor. So then we submit those offers, and as another offer comes in, it could create a bit of leverage. So we utilise those sort of resources to then fuel the potential of competition.
Paul, where do you see as having the biggest impact from a buyer's point of view?
It depends on the calibre of house, depends on the ability of the vendor being able to make those contributions to the property, and also depends on the situation of the vendor to be able to do that. But the reason why, if they can, it becomes the attractive point is because it takes away the liquidity of a buyer buying a property, starting their first mortgage, and then having to put money aside for kitchen, bathroom, paint, carpet, and so forth.
Luke, what is one thing that sellers should really just steer clear of in the current market?
Overpricing your home. It's not like the 90s. There wasn't a lot of property data available back then. Everyone knows now within reason ballpark of what most homes should be worth. There's always those outliers, things with views and water access, all those sorts of things. But in the market we operate in, a lot of the older homes are 60s brick homes built by one of 3 or 4 builders. There's only so much variance. So while every home is unique and special in its own way, if you price your property in a way that is going to gain attention without you feeling exposed, you'll always have a great campaign. So number one thing is just don't overprice your home. I think that's the biggest thing at the moment.
Paul, very briefly, what is one thing that you see sellers just do a lot and you think, oh, I wish they wouldn't?
Sometimes a lot of sellers, agents are typical at doing this. It's not necessarily the case, but they almost love to be lied to. The biggest liar sometimes wins the job. So if your home is worth 1.5 and the other agent tells you it's worth 1.7, why are you considering that when you know that the house is worth 1.5, but there's a variation of that 200,000? So it's almost like they love to be lied to. So my thing is just be more question based to the agent who has that expectation of a 1.7. Dig deeper and do a little bit more research in not only the agent but the office, and see what sort of days on market they hold. And then all that information is available on realestate.com and so forth. You can research that agent. But my opinion is just to be just eye open, be more wary of someone that is overpricing, because it may not be the vendor overpricing, it's maybe the agents quoting a lot higher to sometimes win that business.
I think that's actually really sound advice. Be vigilant, be informed, ask great questions. But look, we are at time today. Thank you both so much for coming on. I appreciate your insights and I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Alice.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining me. This has been Real Talk. For your weekly fix, please follow wherever you listen to your podcasts and tune in next time for more real questions, news and insights on the topics that matter most from realestate.com.au, Australia's #1 address in property. All information provided is general advice and opinion based on current market conditions. These opinions should not be treated as investment advice. Always obtain advice based on your individual circumstances.
Real Talk acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea, air and community. We pay our respects to elders past and present.